I visited the old abandoned laboratory I used to work at. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. About 20 years ago, I got a job at a new laboratory complex that had just finished construction. I was fresh out of the university, and I was excited to work with fellow science-loving individuals in such a fresh complex. The whole complex was built some 10 miles outside the town where I lived at, which is roughly 16.09 kilometers. It was in a remote location, completely surrounded by a thick forest. It was built above a small coal mine, which was shut down after the mining company went bankrupt. The moment I set foot into the complex, I felt uneasy about the place. At first, I shrugged it off as strange butterflies of excitement, but even after months of working there, it never went away. The company in charge of the complex was shady in the best meaning of the word. The first month, I mostly worked in and near the reception desk, dealing with paperwork of arriving shipments of scientific equipment and raw materials. I was told that this was done in order to make sure I'm trustworthy, so to speak. Some would have quit after a week or two, but I was assured that soon enough they would come to a verdict and I would be able to use my knowledge to advance science. One early morning, a shipment came that wasn't in the schedule. My boss just told me not to worry as the schedule might be incorrect, and he told me to have the crates taken to wing number 4. While I waited for the facility's transport truck to come around, I started to wonder what the crates had in them, since the logistics schedule usually lists the contents. Normally, the large metal crates contain refrigerator goods such as plant samples, so I figured that there was no harm in checking. I barely got a peek into the crate when my boss walked in and fired me on the spot. He refused to tell me why I was fired, since we are usually allowed to check the crates unless instructed otherwise. I walked home that day sad, but relieved, since I didn't have to be in that unnerving place ever again. In the following 20 years, I got a new job on the other side of the country. I got married and I had kids. I had almost forgotten that this particular old complex existed. I forgot for good. And this wouldn't have been in my mind if I hadn't driven past the gravel road leading up to the complex while visiting some old friends at the old town. This prompted me to look up the complex on the internet. It turned out that about 6 years after I departed, the company in charge got under fire for not following safety guidelines. The whole facility was shut down after a handful of employees went missing and the CEO of the company took his own life. Being adventurous, I rang my friends and I asked if they wanted to go and explore the complex. Out of the 6 of us, 2 immediately declined as they had heard stories of weird stuff going on in the complex and they didn't like the thought of going missing. Looking back to that moment, I was stupid. Very, very stupid. I fell right into the horror movie trope of exploring the creepy location even when there was concrete evidence that something just wasn't right over there. I suppose I thought that fate would protect the fools like me. Damn, I'm a fool! Damn, I'm a fool. So, it was the four of us. Me, Jonathan, Michael, and Brent. We met at Brent's house to prepare us. You know, to get ready. Because a section of the complex was now underwater, Jonathan brought 2 sets of scuba gear. Since I am the same length as he is, it was decided that I would get the second set in case we want to explore the underwater section. We also packed headlamps and handheld flashlights for everyone, plus some heavy-duty walkie-talkies in case we got separated.
Negative K, nothing further, just see the cabby on the corner.
As I was the only person to have worked there, I advised each and all of them to bring along a Geiger counter, or 2, just to be safe. When we loaded everything in my car and headed to the complex, we got very excited. We headed there. And for the people wondering what a Geiger counter is, it is a device used to measure radiation. Arriving at the main gates, I was surprised to not have that odd feeling like I did when I worked here 20 years ago. Since the gates were chain shut, we left the car behind and we walked the rest of the way. The fence already had holes in them, so we definitely weren't the first ones around. It was at this point when I turned the Geiger counter on. It beeped a little bit. It picked up normal background radiation. At least, we now knew that it worked. Walking around this old complex was cooler than I thought. I was very interested, and it was very interesting to see how much nature had taken over in 20 years. Most of the place was trashed, probably by all the people who came here before us or by the employees when the place shut down. There was one place I wanted to really see with my own eyes. Something I wasn't able to see back in the day. It was the 4th wing. The 4th wing was where all the classified experiments happened. I knew that the wing was probably as empty as the rest of the complex, but my childish curiosity wanted to see what it was all about. The wing was built into a large trench-like hole in the ground. This hole had been filled with rainwater after multiple floods occurred in the area, and most of the wing was definitely underwater. Jonathan and I went back to the car and we got ourselves into our scuba gear while Brent and Michael stayed behind to look for a good entrance into the 4th wing. We regrouped at the central square and the two led me and Jonathan through the complex to the lowest floor, not to be underwater. There was a stairwell leading down which was almost completely full of water besides a small section at the very top. Jonathan and I checked the tanks and then hopped in. The water was cold, so we swam fast to get some warmth into our bodies. We soon reached the bottom of the stairwell. Our plan was to start from the bottom and go upward, floor by floor, swimming together to make sure we don't lose each other. Most of everything was damaged beyond recognition by the water. If there were any documents here, they are definitely gone by now. We eventually reached the large cargo elevator. For the heck of it, I tried to pull open the doors. They moved slightly. Jonathan realized what I tried to do and came to help. We got the doors open enough to get through and noticed that the elevator shaft goes down a lot further than it should. There was at least 3 more floors down there. Jonathan gestured me if we should head down. I was hesitant at first, but we went anyways. I was mostly worried about the water pressure more than anything, but Jonathan was an experienced diver, so I figured that he knew what we were capable of doing. I gestured him to lead the way, and I followed him. We went all the way to the bottom and pried the door open. This is where the strange feeling I had all those years ago came back. Beyond the elevator door was an airlock. It was almost like the designers knew that this place would float. We got the door open and closed the door after us. The airlock had a lever with instructions to pull when the airlock gets filled with water. It seemed like a stupid idea since the place was without electricity, but I pulled the lever anyways. Miraculously, the water started to flow away, and soon we were able to open the other airlock door. The air was stale, but breathable. At least there was no water. We tried to radio the folk upstairs, but nothing. The amount of water and concrete above us must have been blocking the signal. I had also brought the Geiger counter with us. It now was beeping a bit more intensely. Nothing that could harm us, but definitely higher than the average background radiation. Along the wall was written Tauris Complex, Wing 4, Section 31. Jonathan and I started exploring the nearby rooms. So, I did too. I quickly found a large library of files. All of the filing cabinets were for one single project. Some projects even had a second cabinet. I picked the one closest to me and I opened it. The tag on the cabinet simply said Project Skygate. That's Skygate, S-K-Y-G-A-T-E, Skygate. They were trying to build a small-scale particle accelerators to then use to teleport physical matter from one point to another. It mostly seemed like theoretical work though. The second cabinet read Project Greywoolener. Greywoolener. Graywoolener. Greywoolener. The head of the project was the company's CEO himself. It seemed like they tried to do generic experiments on living beings. At first starting with rats, but soon testing on sheep and eventually on human volunteers. At this point I was interrupted by Jonathan. He asked me to follow him and keep an eye on the rats per minute as we were going along. I took the file I was reading with me and I followed Jonathan. The rats increased as we were walking. We eventually got to a large door made of steel and concrete. The text on it was scuffed beyond recognition, but there was something I clearly could read. A black trefoil with a yellow ring. The radiation warning symbol! Hesitantly, we opened the heavy door and we found ourselves above a compact nuclear fission reactor. It was nothing massive, but definitely powerful enough to power the entire wing. We agreed that we should probably leave it alone. There's no way of telling how much damage the reactor had taken in the past 2 decades. We left the reactor chamber and we closed the door. Jonathan went to look around a bit more while I went to look if any of the lights worked, as we hadn't really checked them before. I returned to the library and I tried the light switch. It worked! I found a desk and a chair in the corner, so I sat down and I radioed Jonathan to let him know my whereabouts. That's what I heard in response. "Oh, I hear you, Patrick. I just found some cages. One of them seems to be smashed too."
Help! Help! Ah!
Beep! Jonathan? Jonathan? Huh? Jonathan? Jonathan! I screamed into the walkie-talkie. I got no response. My fight or flight sense triggered. I started panicking. I jumped up from the chair and I bolted across the corridor into a storage, looking for something to defend myself from whatever just attacked Jonathan. I found a large hydraulic piston. I tested the weight and then started to sneak around the corridors. I had no idea what I should do besides look for Jonathan. I probably should have ran to the airlock and escaped, but it felt wrong to leave him behind. I had reached the point where we split up when I heard footsteps. Loud and slow footsteps, echoing through the corridor. I went and I hid behind a door. It could have been Jonathan, or it could have been the thing that attacked him. I couldn't tell what or who it was since it was dark, but whatever it was, it passed me without issue. As soon as I heard it take a corner, I bolted out and I started looking for Jonathan. I soon found the room he was talking about. It was filled with multiple cages, almost like cells. One of these cells had the bars bent and twisted. By the way they were moved, it was caused by something on the inside. I found Jonathan groaning by the wall. He had hit the concrete wall with his head so hard that he was bleeding. It's human, but not, he said before passing out. I checked his pulse. It was erratic, and he was bleeding badly. I looked around for something to help him, bolting across the corridor as quietly as I could. I happened to find some old rolls of bandages and cloth towels. I went back to him. I set the towel on the wound and I secured it by wrapping the bandages around his head. Then I heard the footsteps again. I was forced to leave him right there and hide behind one of the cages. The thing stepped into the room. I heard it breathe heavily, then take a few steps towards my way. I was holding my breath to make sure I didn't make much noise, but the thing was in the room longer than I could handle. I had to breathe, but quietly. The echo of the room and my frightened exhale was too loud. The next thing I heard was loud stomping towards me. I ran towards the corridor. I heard the loud clang of the metal cage. I turned around and I flicked on my flashlight. The thing matched Jonathan's description. It was human, but not. It was tall, at least 16 feet tall. It was basically 5 meters tall. Its posture was hunched, and its muscle mass was definitely enough to demolish a metal cage. Its eyes were sewed shut. The ears were disproportionately massive. I turned around and I ran. I didn't care where. I just ran. The thing had issues with running in the tight halls, so I was able to outrun him. Or outrun it. I found a small metal door, one that I hadn't seen before. I opened it and I closed it after myself. The room I found myself in was a dead end. It was a server room. It was fully operational, just heavily outdated. I found a terminal to access and I realized that there is still an internet connection, albeit a very slow one. The whole thing ran on Windows Vista, but I was able to get to grips with it, enough to make myself a Reddit account and write this post. I have also read some of that file that I took with me. Although the first animal tests proved successful, the first human test failed, killing the test subject. After 3 more deaths, a new gene therapy formula was forced, which meant that the second set of tests were a success. The subject seemed normal at first, but within the next 12 hours, his muscle mass, his hearing, his eyesight, and skeletal structure increased. 24 hours after that, the subject started to regard the scientists as inferior beings and became violent towards others. They tried to hinder him by removing his ability to see, but as the gene therapy was still actively changing the subject from the inside, the subject simply hyper-evolved to have better hearing. He was then put into a tungsten cage on the lowest level of the wing before his body became immune to the sedatives. In the cage he grew in size and strength before breaking free and killing 8 scientists. The CEO blamed himself in the report and wrote a line at the bottom of the report. It said the following thing: "To the person reading this, you have either managed to take him down or you are actively hiding from him. If you are doing the latter, I advise you to pray to God for the last time." I have heard a couple of loud slams against the door. It seems to hold him for now. I'll probably die from hunger and thirst, or probably by him. Jonathan is most likely already dead. This isn't a plea for help, and for God's sake, don't come here to save us, or you'll end up with us. I'm writing this mostly to Brent, Michael, and to my family. Keep going without us. You are strong enough, but also remember us. And don't be as dumb like Jonathan and I, because it was our stupidity that got us killed. Signed, Patrick.